Imagine a world where your net worth literally grows on trees, but trying to print an extra bill is punished not with a prison sentence, but with an agonizing death on a sacrificial altar. Throughout human history, money has taken the strangest forms, from giant stones to digital codes. But no civilization went as far in the art of turning food into an instrument of absolute totalitarian control as the Aztec Empire. In Tenochtitlan, chocolate wasn't a dessert. It was the blood of the economy, the equivalent of a gold bar, and the most perfect way to keep millions of people in check. We are used to thinking of gold as the universal measure of power, but the Aztecs created a system that was far more logical, harsher, and strangely enough, more modern. This is the story of how ordinary cocoa beans became the foundation of the most efficient and brutal financial system of the ancient world, and why this delicious currency made the empire invincible right up until the moment people who worshipped cold yellow metal appeared on the horizon. When the Spanish conquistadors first stepped into the markets of Tenochtitlan, they were stunned not only by the scale of the city, but by how exchange happened there. The great market of Tlatelolco hosted up to 60,000 people a day, and over this living sea, there was no clinking of coins, but a barely audible rustle. Thousands of tiny brown beans changed hands, paying for everything from a brace of rabbits to human lives. To the Europeans, it looked like primitive barter, a funny, savage quirk. But they were wrong. What they were seeing was the result of the finest financial calculation. The Aztec elite understood a truth that modern central banks only realized centuries later. The ideal currency is one that cannot be endlessly hoarded in basements without the risk of losing it. Here is the first paradox that shatters our perception of the past. We are used to gold being valuable because it is eternal. But for managing a vast, aggressive empire, eternity is a problem. Gold allows for the accumulation of wealth that doesn't spoil, which means it creates wealthy individuals who are independent of the state. Cocoa, however, had an expiration date. It dried out, it spoiled, it could be eaten by insects. It was a currency with forced circulation. You couldn't just lock a chest of beans away for 30 years and stay rich. To maintain your status, you had to constantly participate in the economy, serve the empire, or trade. The state effectively implemented a negative interest rate thousands of years before modern economics textbooks were written. But how do you control a currency that literally grows in the forest? Here lies the second, darker facet of Aztec greatness. Tenochtitlan was located in the high altitudes where cocoa trees simply do not grow. The entire supply of money was located in the low-lying tropical regions. This turned cocoa into the perfect tool of colonialism. To have money, the Aztecs had to constantly conquer new lands. Every new war was not just an act of aggression, but a currency emission. The empire expanded to seize plantations and then tax the defeated, a tribute that had to be paid specifically in beans. In the end, the entire economy was looped on war. Fight to get money, spend money to maintain the army, use the army to capture new money. However, the system would be incomplete without the most rigorous oversight. In the Aztec Empire, there were counterfeiters whose ingenuity is staggering. They learned to carefully cut open the shell of a bean, remove the valuable pulp, and fill the void with clay or sand before gluing the bean back together. It was jeweler's work. But the retribution was even more impressive. If a person was caught in the market with counterfeit beans, their fate was sealed. They weren't just killed, they were sacrificed to the gods of trade. Public execution served as a reminder. The right to create value belongs only to the elite. The state held an absolute monopoly on the printing press, which in this case was the tropical forest. By the mid-15th century, the control over cocoa became so total that it defined the social hierarchy. A commoner could grow a crop of corn and be fed, but he could never become wealthy because cocoa beans were the high currency. There was a strict regulation: who was allowed to drink chocolate and who was not. Drinking your own money was considered the ultimate manifestation of power. Imagine a billionaire who burns stacks of $100 bills for breakfast just for pleasure. For an Aztec, a cup of foaming chocolate was exactly that, an act of demonstrative destruction of capital that confirmed your transcendent status. If an ordinary person dared to drink chocolate, it was equated to high treason.
But why did this system make them invincible? The answer lies in mobility. The Aztec army was the fastest in the region because their money was simultaneously their rations. In a critical situation, a soldier could simply eat his wages. This solved the logistics problem that ruined other ancient armies. While enemies relied on cumbersome grain wagons, the Aztecs carried their wealth and their energy in small bags on their backs. It was a perfect war machine, running on high-calorie fuel that was also the global currency reserve. Tragedy struck when two incompatible logics collided. When Hernán Cortés saw the storehouses of Emperor Moctezuma, he expected to find gold. Instead, he found granaries filled to the brim with billions of cocoa beans. The Spaniards laughed, considering it trash. They didn't realize they were looking at the central repository of the entire continent's financial system. By destroying this system and imposing gold, the Spaniards didn't just destroy a culture, they destroyed a unique economic mechanism where inflation and accumulation were regulated by nature itself. The resolution of this story is paradoxical. We are used to thinking that the Aztecs fell due to technical backwardness. But perhaps they fell because their money was too honest. It was tied to real labor, real land, and real consumption. Gold, brought by the Europeans, had no practical use. You can't eat it, it provides no energy. But it was precisely this useless eternity of gold that allowed the Europeans to accumulate enough power to crush a civilization that built its might on what could be held in the hand, grown, and tasted. In the end, there is a bitter aftertaste, much like the most ancient chocolate. We live in a world where money is again becoming virtual, intangible, existing somewhere in cloud storage. And in this sense, we are much closer to the Spaniards with their abstract gold. But the ancient Aztecs left us an important lesson. Any financial system is just a way of managing human fear and desire. And it doesn't matter what lies at the heart of your economy: beans, gold, or bitcoins. If you have the right to decide what counts as value and what counts as clay inside an empty shell, you own the world. The Aztecs knew this better than anyone. They created an empire where wealth was alive, and the death for it was absolutely real. And perhaps the next time you open a bar of chocolate, you will remember that once upon a time, for this treat, people gave not a small coin, but the right to breathe.